I saw my daughter-in-law bury a wooden box in the backyard at 2 a.m. and drive away. I ran over, heard muffled whimpering coming from underground, and whispered, "Please, not what I think it is." I dug frantically, pulled the box out, forced the lid open, and my heart stopped. What I saw inside made me tremble in a way I had never felt in my 58 years of life. But let me explain how I got to that moment, how a quiet September night turned into the most terrifying scene I have ever witnessed. Because what I discovered that night wasn't just a crime. It was a web of lies, murder, and betrayal that went deeper than I could have ever imagined. And it all started with a feeling I couldn't shake. A mother's intuition that something was terribly wrong with the woman my son had married. It was 2:15 in the morning. I know because I had just checked my bedside clock, that old digital clock that belonged to my late husband Robert. The red numbers glowed in the darkness like angry eyes, mocking my sleeplessness. I was lying in bed in the house where I raised David, my only son, the house that now felt too big, too quiet, too full of ghosts since I buried him 8 months ago. The grief was still fresh, still raw. Some nights I could swear I heard his key in the front door, his voice calling, "Hey, Mom," as he walked through the house. But it was always just the wind, just my imagination, just the cruel tricks that loss plays on a broken heart. The backyard stretched in front of my bedroom window, still as a graveyard. It was cold, the kind of bone-deep chill that makes you shiver under thick blankets, even when you're lying still. September in Ohio can be unpredictable, but this felt different. This felt ominous, like the air itself was holding its breath. I couldn't sleep. I hadn't been sleeping well since David's funeral. The house felt wrong without his laughter, without his weekend visits, without his voice calling to tell me about his day at the engineering firm. The silence was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the occasional creak of old wood settling. Robert used to say this house had good bones. We bought it 35 years ago when David was just 3 years old. It was our dream home then. White picket fence, big backyard for David to play in, quiet neighborhood where everyone knew each other's names. Now it felt like a mausoleum, filled with memories I couldn't bear to face, but couldn't bear to leave behind. Then I saw her. Elena's black SUV appeared in our driveway, headlights off, moving like a shadow through the darkness. My daughter-in-law, my son's widow. She was moving like someone with a terrible secret. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I knew that look. David and I used to watch from this same window when she first started dating him 3 years ago. Back then, I thought she was just shy, reserved. "Give her time, Mom," David would say. "She's been hurt before. She needs to learn to trust." Now I realized she was calculating. Always calculating. Always planning. She parked and sat in the car for a full minute, looking around nervously. Her head turned left, then right, scanning the neighborhood like a criminal checking for witnesses. Mrs. Henderson's house was dark. The Johnsons were probably asleep. The street was empty except for the occasional stray cat prowling through the shadows. Then she got out, wearing dark clothes, a black hoodie pulled up over her head. Her movements were jerky, panicked. She looked like she had been crying or screaming or both. Even from my bedroom window, I could see the tension in her body. Her shoulders were hunched, her steps quick and unsteady. This wasn't the composed Elena I knew. This was someone on the edge of a breakdown. Elena had always been beautiful in that cold, untouchable way. Blonde hair always perfectly styled, makeup always flawless, clothes always expensive. David was mesmerized by her from the moment they met at some company party. "She's sophisticated, Mom," he'd tell me. "She's traveled the world. She's seen things." What he didn't see was the way her eyes never quite smiled when her mouth did. The way she calculated the cost of everything, including my son's love. She opened the trunk with trembling hands, and then I saw it. The wooden box. That handmade cedar box David had crafted in high school shop class when he was 16. "For my future treasures," he had told me that day, so proud of his work. He'd spent weeks on it, sanding every surface until it was smooth as silk, applying coat after coat of varnish until it gleamed. How naive we both were. How innocent. How could we have known that box would one day hold the darkest secret imaginable? Elena pulled it out of the trunk. It was heavy. I could tell by how her body bent, how her arms strained under the weight. She almost dropped it twice, catching it at the last second with a desperation that made my stomach turn. She glanced around again, nervous, scared, guilty. I will never forget that look. It was the look of someone who knew they were about to cross a line they could never uncross. Then she walked toward the old oak tree in the corner of our yard. That tree had been there when Robert and I bought the house 35 years ago. David used to climb it as a boy, build tree houses in its branches, carve his initials in its bark. He'd proposed to his high school girlfriend under that tree, though that relationship didn't last past graduation. Now it was about to become the site of something unspeakable. Every step Elena took seemed to be a struggle, as if she were carrying the weight of the world or something worse. Her feet dragged in the grass, still wet with evening dew. She stumbled once, caught herself, kept going. The distance from the driveway to the oak tree was maybe 100 yards, but it seemed to take her forever. "Elena!" I wanted to shout from the window, but I was too far away. The distance between my bedroom and the oak tree was too great for her to hear me. Or maybe instinct told me to stay hidden. Something deep in my gut was screaming that this was dangerous, that I needed to see what she was doing before I acted. She set the box down carefully, almost reverently. Then she began digging with a small shovel she had brought. The sound of metal hitting earth cut through the night air like a knife. She dug frantically, desperately, like someone running out of time. Dirt flew in all directions. She was breathing hard. I could see her breath in the cold air, little puffs of white that dissipated quickly in the darkness. The hole grew deeper. 1 foot, 2 feet. She was digging like her life depended on it, or like someone else's life depended on it. Her movements became more frantic as the hole deepened. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cold. She kept looking over her shoulder as if expecting someone to catch her. Then she placed the box in the hole. She stood there for a moment, staring down at it, and I swear I saw her lips moving like she was saying something. A prayer? An apology? A goodbye? Her whole body was shaking now, whether from cold or emotion, I couldn't tell. She seemed to be having some kind of internal struggle, as if part of her wanted to pull the box back out. Then she started covering it with dirt, handful by handful, until there was nothing but a small mound of disturbed earth. She patted it down, tried to make it look natural. But even from my window, I could see the difference. The earth was darker, fresher. It looked like a grave. She ran back to the car as if the devil himself was chasing her. She started the engine, still no headlights, and disappeared down Maple Street, leaving only dust and silence and the terrible knowledge that something evil had just happened in my backyard. I was paralyzed. 10 seconds, 20, 30. My brain was trying to process what I had just seen. Elena, the box, the backyard, the desperation in her movements. Something was terribly wrong. But what? What could possibly be in that box that required such secrecy, such panic? My mind raced through possibilities. Documents? Money? Drugs? But none of those explained the weight, the size, the way Elena had looked at it like it was something alive, something precious, something terrible. I felt a chill run down my spine despite the thick comforter covering me. My legs started moving before my mind could stop them. I threw off the covers, grabbed my robe, and ran. I ran like I hadn't run in years. My knees protested. Arthritis had been bothering me more lately. My chest burned, but I didn't stop. I ran down the stairs, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood floors Robert had installed when we first moved in. I ran through the kitchen, past the refrigerator covered with photos of David, his graduation, his first job, his wedding to Elena. I ran past the table where we used to eat Sunday dinners together, where David would tell us about his week, his dreams, his plans for the future. I ran out the back door into the cold night air. The grass was wet with dew, soaking through my slippers immediately. The cold shocked my system, but I kept running across the backyard to the disturbed earth. The oak tree loomed above me, its branches swaying in the wind like accusing fingers. When I reached the spot, I was breathless. My heart was pounding against my ribs so hard I thought it might burst. The earth was there, freshly turned, dark, heavy. It smelled of worms and decay, and something else I couldn't identify. Something that made my stomach turn. I went back into the house without thinking twice. I grabbed a shovel from the garage, the same shovel Robert used to plant roses for me on our anniversary every year. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the handle. The metal was cold against my palms, rough from years of use. I ran back to the oak tree and started digging. The earth was cold, much colder than I expected. It was also harder to dig than Elena had made it look. The ground was packed, resistant. Mud stuck to my feet. I almost lost a slipper. My back ached. My arms burned. But I kept digging. Each shovelful revealed more of the hole Elena had dug. The earth was dark, rich, full of earthworms that writhed in the sudden exposure to air. I tried not to think about what I might find, tried not to let my imagination run wild, but deep down, I already knew. The weight of the box, the size, the desperate way Elena had buried it, there was only one explanation that made sense. I stretched my arms down into the hole. I felt something solid. Wood. The box. I pulled. It was incredibly heavy, as if it were full of stones, or worse. Much worse. I didn't want to think about what could be worse, but my mind was already going there, to the darkest possibilities. I pulled harder. My arms were shaking with the effort. Dirt flew in my face, got in my mouth, my eyes. The taste was bitter, earthy, mixed with something that might have been fear. Finally, the box gave way. I started dragging it out of the hole. It took everything I had to get it to the surface. I was covered in mud, exhausted, terrified. But I had to know. I had to see what Elena had been so desperate to hide. And then I heard it. A sound. Weak, muffled, coming from inside the box. My blood ran cold. My hands froze on the wooden lid. No, it couldn't be. Please, God, don't let it be what I'm thinking. But I knew. Deep in my heart, I knew. The weight of the box, the size, the desperate way Elena had buried it. There was only one thing that made sense, and it was the most horrible thing I could imagine. I pulled faster, more desperately. I dragged the box completely out of the earth and onto the grass. I fell to my knees beside it, my pajamas soaking through from the wet ground. My hands fumbled for the lid. It was stuck, dirty, with earth clinging to the edges. My fingers kept slipping. "Come on! Come on! Come on!" I repeated through gritted teeth. Tears began to blur my vision. I forced the lid once, twice. It was like it was sealed shut, like it didn't want to give up its secret. The wood was swollen from moisture, making it even harder to open. I could hear that sound again, faint but unmistakable. Something was alive in there. Something was suffering. On the third try, it opened abruptly. I lifted the lid, and what I saw inside made the whole world stop. My heart stopped beating. Air got trapped in my throat. My hands flew to my mouth to muffle a scream that threatened to wake the entire neighborhood. There, wrapped in a light blue blanket soaked through with dirt and moisture, was a baby. A newborn. So small, so fragile, so impossibly still. Her lips were purple. Her skin was pale as wax. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't moving. "Oh my God! Oh my God! No!" The words came out as a whisper, then a sob, then a wail. This was someone's baby. This was a human being, a life, a future that someone had tried to bury like garbage. This was David's box, the one he'd made with such love and care, being used for something so evil it defied comprehension. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold her. I lifted her from the box, with a gentleness I didn't know I still had. She was cold, so cold. She weighed less than a bag of groceries. Her little head fit in the palm of my hand like a fragile bird. Her umbilical cord was still attached, tied off with a piece of string. Not a medical clamp, not sterile equipment. Common string, like you'd use to tie a package. As if someone had done this at home, in secret, without any medical help. The implications of that hit me like a physical blow. "No, no, no," I whispered repeatedly. "This couldn't be happening. Not in my backyard. Not in my quiet neighborhood where the biggest crime was usually someone forgetting to put their garbage cans away." I pressed my ear to her tiny chest. Silence. Nothing. My heart sank. I was too late. Whatever Elena had done, I was too late to stop it. This beautiful, innocent baby had died because of someone's evil, someone's greed, someone's complete lack of humanity. But then I pressed my cheek to her nose and felt it. A breath of air so weak I thought I had imagined it. But it was there, barely perceptible. But there, she was breathing. This baby was alive. The realization hit me like lightning. I stood up, pressing the baby against my chest. My legs almost gave out. The shock, the cold, the sheer impossibility of what was happening hit me all at once. But I couldn't collapse. Not now. This baby needed me. I ran toward the house faster than I had ever run in my life. Water dripped from my clothes. My bare feet bled from the stones on the path, but I felt no pain, only terror, only urgency, only the desperate need to save this tiny life trembling against me. I burst into the house screaming. I don't know what I was screaming. Maybe help, maybe God, maybe nothing coherent. I grabbed the kitchen phone with one hand while holding the baby with the other. I dialed 911. My fingers slipped on the buttons. The phone almost fell twice. 911. "What's your emergency?" a female voice said, calm and professional. "A baby," I sobbed. "I found a baby buried in the backyard. She's not responding. She's cold. She's purple. Please, please, send help." "Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Tell me your address." I gave my address on Maple Street. The words came out jumbled, mixed with sobs and gasps. The operator was patient, professional, but I could hear the urgency creeping into her voice too. "Ma'am, I need you to put the baby on a flat surface. Can you do that?" I swept everything off the kitchen table with one arm. Everything shattered on the floor. Plates, papers, the salt and pepper shakers Robert gave me for our 20th anniversary. Nothing mattered. I laid the baby on the table. So small, so fragile, so still. "Is she breathing?" the operator asked. I looked. Barely, very barely. A movement so subtle I had to lean in close to see it. Her tiny chest rose and fell like a whisper. "Yes, I think so. Very little." "Okay, listen to me carefully. I'm going to guide you through this. I need you to get a clean towel and dry the baby very gently. Then wrap her to keep her warm. The ambulance is on its way." I did what she said. I got towels from the bathroom, the soft blue ones David gave me last Christmas. I dried her little body with clumsy, desperate movements. Every second felt like an eternity. Her skin was so pale, so cold. I wrapped the baby in clean towels, then in my own robe for extra warmth. I picked her up again, nestled her against my chest. I started rocking her without realizing it. An old instinct I thought I had forgotten from when David was a baby 30 years ago. "Hold on," I whispered to her. "Please, hold on. They're coming. They're coming to help you." The minutes it took for the ambulance to arrive were the longest of my life. I sat on the kitchen floor with the baby against my chest. I sang. I don't know what I sang. Maybe the same lullaby I used to sing to David when he was little. Maybe just meaningless sounds. I just needed her to know she wasn't alone, that someone was holding her, that someone wanted her to live. The sirens broke the silence. Red and white lights flashed through the windows, painting the walls in emergency colors. I ran to the door. 2 paramedics rushed out of the ambulance. An older man with a graying beard and kind eyes, and a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She took the baby from my arms with an efficiency that broke my heart. She examined her quickly, pulled out a stethoscope, listened. Her face showed no emotion, but I saw her shoulders tense. I saw the look she exchanged with her partner. Severe hypothermia, possible aspiration of dirt. "We need to move now," she said to her partner. They put her on a tiny stretcher, smaller than a pillow. They put an oxygen mask on her that covered most of her face. Their hands worked fast, connecting wires, monitors, things I didn't understand, but that looked important and scary. The man looked at me. "You're coming with us." It wasn't a question. I got in the ambulance, sat on the small side bench. I couldn't stop looking at the baby, so small among all that equipment. The ambulance took off. The sirens wailed. The world passed blurred through the windows as we raced through the empty streets of our small town. "How did you find her?" the paramedic asked while continuing to work on the baby. "In a box, buried in the backyard. I saw someone bury her." She looked up, stared at me, then looked at her partner. I saw something in her eyes. Concern, maybe suspicion, maybe pity. I realized how this must sound. How crazy this must seem. "Did you see who it was?" I opened my mouth, closed it. "Elena, my daughter-in-law, my son's widow, the woman who cried at David's funeral as if her world had ended. The same woman who had just tried to kill a baby. How could I say that? How could I even believe it? But I had seen it with my own eyes. "Yes," I finally said. "I saw who it was. We arrived at Mercy General Hospital in less than 15 minutes. The emergency doors opened automatically. A dozen people in white and green coats surrounded the stretcher. They were shouting numbers, medical terms, orders I didn't understand. They took the baby running through a set of double doors that swung shut behind them with a finality that made my heart sink. I tried to follow, but a nurse stopped me. "Ma'am, you need to stay here. The doctors are working. We need some information." She took me to a waiting room. Cream-colored walls, plastic chairs that had seen better days, the smell of disinfectant and fear. I sat. I was shaking from head to toe. I didn't know if it was from the cold of my wet clothes or from shock. Probably both. The nurse sat across from me. She was older than the paramedic. Maybe my age. She had gentle wrinkles around her eyes and gray hair that reminded me of my sister. Her name tag said, "Carol. I'm going to need you to tell me everything that happened," she said in a soft voice. And I told every detail, from the moment I saw Elena's car to opening the box. Carol took notes on a tablet. She nodded. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look at me like I was crazy, which I appreciated more than she could know. When I finished, she sighed deeply. "The police are going to want to talk to you," she said. "This is attempted murder, maybe worse." Attempted murder. The words hung in the air like black birds. My daughter-in-law, my son's wife, a murderer. I couldn't process it. I couldn't understand it. Elena, who brought me flowers on Mother's Day. Elena, who helped me clean out David's apartment after the funeral. Elena, who seemed to love my son so much. But now I remembered things. Little things that hadn't seemed important at the time. The way Elena always asked about David's finances, the way she pushed him to increase his life insurance, the way she seemed more interested in his paycheck than his dreams. Carol put her hand on mine. "You did the right thing. You saved a life today." But it didn't feel like it. It felt like I had discovered something terrible, something I couldn't push back into the darkness, something that would change everything forever. 2 hours passed before a doctor came out to talk to me. He was young, maybe 35. He had deep, dark circles under his eyes and hands that smelled of antibacterial soap. He looked exhausted, like he'd been fighting a war. "The baby is stable," he said. "For now. She's in the neonatal ICU. She suffered severe hypothermia and aspirated dirt. Her lungs are compromised. The next 48 hours are critical." "Will she live?" I asked. My voice sounded broken, like it belonged to someone else. "I don't know," he said with brutal honesty. "We'll do everything we can. But I have to be honest with you. What this baby went through, most don't survive. The fact that she's breathing at all is a miracle." The police arrived half an hour later. 2 officers, a woman in her 40s with hair pulled back in a tight bun, and a younger man taking notes. The woman introduced herself as Detective Patricia Salazar. She had dark eyes that seemed to see through lies and a no-nonsense attitude that made me sit up straighter. They asked the same questions repeatedly, from different angles. I described the car, the exact time, Elena's movements, the box, everything I could remember. Patricia stared at me with an intensity that made me feel guilty, even though I had done nothing wrong. "And you're absolutely sure it was your daughter-in-law?" "Completely sure. Why would she do something like this?" "I don't know." "Where is she now?" "I don't know." "When was the last time you spoke to her before today?" 3 weeks ago, on the anniversary of my son's death. That had been a difficult day. Elena had come over, supposedly to grieve together, but she seemed more interested in asking about David's will, about his life insurance, about whether I knew if he had any other assets she might not know about. Patricia wrote something in her notebook. She exchanged a look with her partner that I couldn't read. "We're going to need you to come to the station tomorrow to make a formal statement, and you cannot contact Elena under any circumstances. Understood?" I nodded. What would I say to her anyway? Why did you try to kill a baby? Why did you bury her in my backyard like trash? Why? Why? The officers left. Carol came back with a blanket and a cup of hot tea that tasted like nothing but warmed my hands. "You should go home. Rest. Change clothes." But I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave that baby alone in the hospital. That baby I had held against my chest, who had breathed her last breath of hope in my arms. What if she woke up and no one was there? What if she died and no one was holding her hand? I stayed in the waiting room. Carol brought dry clothes from the hospital stock, scrubs, and an oversized t-shirt that said Mercy General on the front. I changed in the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like I had aged 10 years in one night. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in that plastic chair watching the clock. Every hour I got up and asked about the baby. The nurses gave the same answer: stable, critical, fighting. At 3 a.m., Father Martinez appeared, the priest from my church. Someone must have called him. He sat next to me in silence. He didn't say anything for a long time. He was just there. Sometimes that's all you need, a presence. Proof that you're not completely alone in hell. God tests us in many ways, he finally said. This doesn't feel like a test, I replied. It feels like a curse. He nodded. He didn't try to convince me otherwise, and I appreciated that more than any sermon. When the sun began to rise, I knew nothing would ever be the same. I had crossed a line. I had seen something I couldn't unsee. And whatever came next, I would have to face it. Because that baby, that tiny being fighting for every breath in the room next door, had become my responsibility. I hadn't chosen this. But I also couldn't abandon her. Not after pulling her from the earth, not after feeling her heart beat against mine. The next day brought news that shattered my world completely. Detective Patricia returned with a folder in her hands and an expression I couldn't read. She was accompanied by a man in a suit who looked like a lawyer. "Margaret, we need to talk. We received the results of the baby's DNA test." DNA. I didn't understand why they had done that. What were they looking for? "And?" I asked when the silence became unbearable. Patricia opened the folder and placed several papers in front of me. The man in the suit introduced himself as Dr. Alan Mendez, a forensic geneticist. "The baby is a girl. She was born approximately 3 days ago, according to medical exams." Patricia paused, and I could see she was choosing her words carefully. "And Margaret, she's your granddaughter, David's daughter." The world stopped. The words didn't make sense. I heard them, but my brain refused to process them. My granddaughter. Impossible. David died 8 months ago. He left no children. No pregnancy. Nothing. "That's impossible," I whispered. "The results are conclusive," Dr. Mendez said. "We ran the test twice to be sure. The baby shares approximately 25% of DNA with you. She's definitely your biological granddaughter. David's daughter. My David." I felt like someone had hit me in the chest with a sledgehammer. David had a daughter he never knew existed, a daughter someone had tried to bury alive in my backyard. But how? My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. David died 8 months ago. Elena never said anything about a pregnancy. Exactly, Patricia said, leaning forward. Elena was pregnant during the accident. According to our calculations, she got pregnant about a month before David's death, which means she knew. The room was spinning. Elena knew she was pregnant when David died. Why didn't she say anything? Why did she hide the pregnancy for 9 months? Why did she give birth in secret and then try to kill her own daughter? I don't understand, I said. Tears began to blur my vision. Why would she do something like this? It's her daughter, David's daughter. That's what we need to find out, Patricia said. But there's more, Margaret. I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm going to say. I braced myself. I didn't know for what, but I knew what was coming would be worse. We've been investigating your son's accident, and there are inconsistencies, big inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? David's car was examined after the accident. The official report said it was a skid due to rain, but we asked for it to be checked again. They found evidence of sabotage in the brakes. Someone sabotaged them. The word fell like a bomb. Sabotage. Murder. My son hadn't died in an accident. He had been murdered. Elena, I said. It wasn't a question. She's our main suspect, Patricia admitted. But we need evidence, and we need to find her. She's completely disappeared. She hasn't used her phone. She hasn't touched her bank accounts. It's like she evaporated. I got up from the chair. I needed to move. I needed air. I walked to the window. Outside, the city glowed with millions of lights. Normal life, normal people, while I was trapped in this nightmare. My son, I whispered against the glass. My baby. She killed him. No one answered. There was nothing to say. Patricia continued. We found more evidence. David's phone. We finally managed to unlock it and found text messages between him and Elena from 2 weeks before his death. She pulled out printed screenshots. David discovered the pregnancy. He confronted Elena about it. She said she didn't want the baby. David threatened to divorce her and fight for custody if she tried to harm their daughter. I read the messages with shaking hands. David's words were protective, loving. Elena's were cold, calculating. The first message was from David. We need to talk. I know about the baby. Elena's response, I don't know what you're talking about. David, I found the pregnancy test in the bathroom. Why didn't you tell me? A long silence, then Elena. I wasn't ready to tell. I was scared. Scared of what? I'm your husband. We're going to be parents. This is wonderful. Another silence then. I don't want to have it. The messages got more heated from there. David pleading, Elena resisting. The last message was from Elena the day before David died. You'll regret this. The next day, David was dead. She killed him, I said. She killed him because he was going to protect the baby. That's what we believe, Patricia said. And there's more. We checked David's finances. 2 weeks before he died, he changed his will. He left everything to future children. Not to Elena, to the children. The air left my lungs. David knew. Somehow he knew Elena was dangerous and changed the will to protect his daughter. She killed him for money, I whispered. We believe so. David had a $200,000 life insurance policy, plus savings and investments worth another $300,000. Elena collected the insurance, but the rest would go to the baby if she was born alive. So Elena decided to eliminate her too. The pure evil of it left me speechless. She had killed my son. She had carried the pregnancy to term. She had given birth alone, and then she had tried to bury her own daughter alive, all for money. Do you have enough to arrest her? When we find her, yes, but she's still missing. She's smart. She knows we're looking. But Elena had vanished completely. No phone usage, no bank activity, no sightings. It was as if she had evaporated into thin air. Meanwhile, the baby, I named her Hope after my mother, slowly recovered. The doctors called it a miracle. No baby who went through what she went through should be doing so well. But social services wanted to place her in foster care. I petitioned for custody. At 58, they said I was too old, too unstable, too involved in a criminal investigation. She's my granddaughter, I pleaded. My blood. We understand, the social worker said. Her name was Alice, and she looked young enough to be my daughter. But the system has protocols. You'll need evaluations, home inspections, psychological tests. It could take months. It took weeks of bureaucratic hell. Background checks, medical exams, home inspections, parenting classes. Every hoop they made me jump through felt like torture while Hope was in temporary foster care, visited twice a week under supervision. The psychological evaluation was the worst. A young woman with glasses asked me questions for 3 hours. How did you deal with your son's death? How do you feel about Elena? Are you trying to replace David with this baby? That last question made me angry. I'm not replacing anyone. I'm saving my granddaughter. It's different. She wrote something. I didn't know if it was good or bad. The home inspection was humiliating. 2 women checked every corner of my house. They opened cabinets, checked the refrigerator, measured windows to see if they were safe, counted smoke detectors, asked about my emergency plan in case of fire. You'll need a certified crib, a changing table, safety gates on all stairs, cabinet locks, outlet protectors. I spent $200 on baby equipment. My pension barely covered my basic expenses. I had to use my savings, but I didn't mind. Hope was worth every penny. The infant care course was the worst. 15 young mothers and me. They all looked at me like I was the confused grandmother who walked into the wrong class. The instructor was 25 years old. She explained things I already knew with insulting slowness. Babies need to eat every 3 hours. Babies cry when they're hungry or wet. Never shake a baby. I nodded and took notes, even though I wanted to scream that I had raised a child to adulthood, that I knew exactly what I was doing. But I needed that certificate. So I swallowed my pride and pretended to learn. But I did it all. Every requirement, every test, every humiliating evaluation. Because Hope was worth it. She was all I had left of David. Finally, the judge granted me temporary custody. I brought Hope home on a cold December morning, 6 weeks after finding her in that box. Those first weeks were the hardest of my life. I had forgotten how exhausting it is to care for a newborn. The sleepless nights, the constant worry, the fear of doing something wrong. At 58, I didn't have the energy I had when David was a baby. But there were moments of pure magic. When Hope grabbed my finger with her tiny hand. When she stopped crying at the sound of my voice. When she opened those dark eyes identical to David's and looked at me as if I were her whole world. Carol, the nurse from the hospital, became my lifeline. She visited 3 times a week, teaching me things I had forgotten, helping me navigate the challenges of raising a baby at 58. You're doing an incredible job, she told me every time. But I didn't feel incredible. I felt terrified. Every strange noise at night made me jump. Every car that passed slowly by my house made me nervous. Elena was still out there somewhere. I installed new locks on all doors, security cameras on the porch, an alarm connected directly to the police. I spent another $800 I didn't have. But Hope's safety was priceless. Months passed. Hope grew stronger, healthier, more beautiful every day. She had David's smile, his gentle nature, his curiosity about the world. At 6 months, she was sitting up. At 8 months, she was crawling. Every milestone was a victory. The judge granted me permanent custody when Hope was 6 months old. I officially adopted her. She was legally mine. No one could ever take her from me. But Elena remained a ghost. Until one night when Hope was 8 months old. My phone rang at 11 p.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Margaret. Elena's voice. My blood ran cold. I looked around as if she might be hiding in the shadows. Where are you? I managed to say. It doesn't matter where I am. What matters is I have something you want to know, and you have something I want. You don't have anything I want. I have the truth about what really happened to David, about why I did what I did, and you have my daughter and my money. She's not your daughter anymore. You tried to kill her. A cold laugh. Legally, I'm still her mother. And I want her back, along with the money from David's will, all of it, $500,000. And if I refuse, then I'll come take her. I know where you live. I know your routines. I've been watching. The threat chilled me to the bone. But I had to keep her talking. I fumbled for my phone with my free hand and started recording. What do you want, Elena? Meet me at the old warehouse by the lake. You know, the one where you and David used to fish when he was little. Tomorrow at midnight. Bring Hope and signed papers transferring the money to me. Come alone, or you'll never see me again. And eventually, I'll find a way to take her anyway. Elena, wait. But the line was dead. I called Patricia immediately. We set a trap. I would wear a wire, get Elena to confess while police surrounded the building. Hope would stay with Carol, safe and far away. The next night, I drove to the warehouse. My heart pounded as I entered the dark building, knowing police were hidden in the shadows, knowing this could go very wrong. Elena, I called. You came, she said, stepping out of the darkness. She looked different, thinner. Her hair was short, dyed blonde, but it was definitely her. You said you wanted to talk. I said I wanted my daughter and the money. Where are they? I want answers first. I want to know why. Why did you kill David? Why did you try to kill Hope? She laughed, that same cold sound I remembered from family dinners. Why do you think, Margaret? For the money. It was always about the money. David loved you. He gave you everything. David was a romantic fool. He talked about love and family and future. I wanted freedom. I wanted to travel, live, not be tied down to a house and a crying baby. Then why did you marry him? Because he was an engineer. He made good money. He had savings. He had life insurance. It was an investment. I was going to wait 5 years, divorce him, take half of everything. But then I got pregnant and it ruined my plan. Her words were poison. Each one burned me. You told him you didn't want the baby. Of course I didn't want it. But David became impossible. He changed his will. Everything to the baby. So I had to adapt. If David died while I was pregnant, I'd collect the insurance, but the baby would inherit the rest. So the solution was simple. Kill David, have the baby, kill her too, keep everything. She was confessing. Everything. Every word recorded. The police were listening. You hired someone to sabotage the brakes. 2,000, a bargain considering. I got 200,000 from insurance. Best investment of my life. And Hope, your own daughter. She was an obstacle, nothing more. I gave birth alone in a cabin I rented with cash. No one knew I was pregnant. When she was born, I thought about just leaving her somewhere. But then I remembered the backyard where you and David used to go. It seemed poetic to end everything where your little family tradition began. I felt sick. I felt rage. I felt all the hatred in the world concentrated on the woman standing in front of me. But you failed. I saved her. Yes, that was annoying. But it doesn't matter because now I'm going to finish the job. Where is Hope, Margaret? I'm not giving her to you. Then I saw the gun. She pulled it from her jacket. Small, black, pointing directly at my chest. Last chance. Where is my daughter? I pressed the panic button on my wire, once, twice, 3 times. You'll never touch her, I said. Her finger moved to the trigger. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. I saw the flash. I heard the shot. I felt something hit my shoulder, hot, burning. I fell backward, and then the warehouse exploded into movement. Doors burst open, blinding lights, voices shouting, "Police! Drop the weapon, now!" I saw Elena turn. I saw the guns pointed at her. I saw she was surrounded. I saw she had lost. She slowly lowered the gun, let it fall to the ground. She raised her hands. 3 officers tackled her, pressed her face to the ground, handcuffed her. She was screaming, curses, threats. But it didn't matter. She was arrested. It was over. Finally over. Patricia ran to me, knelt by my side. "Margaret, stay with me." "I'm okay," I managed to say, even though the pain in my shoulder was excruciating. "You got her. Tell me, you got her. We got her. It's over now. Stay still. The ambulance is coming. I closed my eyes. It was enough. It was over. Finally over. I woke up in the hospital. The bullet had torn through muscle but missed bone. Lucky, the doctor said. 2 inches to the left and it would have been your heart. Elena was arrested, charged with first-degree murder for David and attempted murder for Hope and me. The recording of her confession sealed her fate. She received life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge granted me full and permanent custody of Hope. I officially adopted her. She was mine. Forever. Years passed. Hope grew into an intelligent, compassionate, beautiful child. She looked exactly like David. At 5, she asked about her parents. Your daddy was a hero, I told her. He died protecting you before you were even born. And your birth mother, she made bad choices. But you have me, and I love you more than anything in the world. More than ice cream? More than ice cream? More than everything? More than everything in the entire universe. At 10, Hope said she wanted to be a police officer when she grew up, to help children like Detective Patricia had helped her. I want to save babies like you saved me, Grandma. At 18, she graduated valedictorian. Her speech was about second chances, about how one person can change the course of an entire life. 17 years ago, she said from the podium, someone tried to end my life before it even began. But another person refused to let that happen. That person taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about love. It's about choosing to stay when it would be easier to leave. She looked directly at me. Grandma, thank you for choosing me. Thank you for fighting for me. Thank you for showing me what kind of person I want to be. Hope got her degree in criminal justice, became a detective, specialized in missing children cases. Every child she saved was a victory for David's memory. At 25, she married a wonderful man named Marcus. At their wedding, I walked her down the aisle. Thank you, she whispered as I gave her away, for everything, for saving me, for raising me, for loving me unconditionally. You're the best mother anyone could have. A year later, she gave me the most wonderful news. Grandma, you're going to be a great-grandmother. 9 months later, I held my great-grandson in my arms, David Jr. He had the family's dark eyes, the long hands, the same gentle smile as his grandfather. Hello, little David, I whispered. I'm your great-grandmother. I have so many stories to tell you about your grandfather, about your mother, about how we got here. At 80, watching David Jr. play in the same backyard where I once found Hope buried, I knew I had lived a complete life. I had turned the greatest tragedy into the greatest blessing. That baby who should have died in the dark earth had grown up to become a force for good in the world. She was saving other children, continuing the legacy of protection and love. Great-grandma, David Jr. called to me, tell me the story again. And I told him about courage, about family, about how love always wins in the end, about how sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead to the most beautiful. Because that's what I learned that terrible night when I saw Elena bury that box. That evil may strike, but love strikes back harder. That family isn't about blood. It's about choice, commitment, and never giving up on the people who matter most. Hope had grown up knowing she was wanted, loved, fought for, and now she was passing that same fierce protection to the next generation. Elena had tried to destroy our family. Instead, she had made it stronger. The legacy of love would continue, from David to Hope to David Jr. and beyond. And in the end, that's all that really matters. Love wins, family endures, hope survives. Which city are you listening from today? I love seeing where you're tuning in from around the world. If this story of a grandmother's courage gave you strength, a super thanks helps me bring you more incredible true stories of survival and justice. At what point in this story would you have said, enough? Share in the comments below. These stories of resilience connect us all.